Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Gustavo Tolosa. I'm not a medical doctor. I am a doctor in music, a concert pianist, to be more precise. And I have given myself the name of Triple P, PPP, because I am the plant-powered pianist. I have some pretty good background and whole food plant-based cooking and eating and nutrition because I've been doing this for 12 years. I know many of you have been doing this longer. I'm just I'm certified in the START solution by the McDougall Medical Health Center and also by the Food Safety Institute. I'm a certified nutrition instructor. And I have a Facebook page that is called Dr. Starch, all spelled out, and a YouTube channel that is called Plantemus, Plant, Plantemus. And please visit it. It's free, and there's a lot of wonderful information there. And I have a website that is also called Plantemus. Plantemus is because it's plant, food, and then MUS is for music, and those are like my two passions in life. So today we have one of my favorite guests, Dr. Alan Goldhamer, who is the founder and director of the TrueNorth Health Center in Santa Rosa, California, where I have the pleasure of staying as often as I can make it there. I just love to chat with Dr. Goldhamer. If I would interview him every day if I could, but he's a very busy person. And so today we're very grateful to have a few minutes with him. And so, hello, Dr. Goldhamer. How are you
Hi,
today?
doing great.
True North is a very busy place these days. And so for those people who may not know what True North is, would you tell us in a few words what to expect when you stay at True North?
Well, sure. We're an integrative healthcare facility. We have medical doctors, chiropractors, osteopaths, naturopaths, et cetera. We have a 75-bed inpatient facility so people can stay with us. We offer supervision of fasting as well as a whole plant food SOS-free diet. And we offer telemedicine, so our doctors also work with people remotely. And we also have, outpatient, more traditional outpatient practice as well there. So it's basically doctors that are interested in actually helping people get well, get off their medications, make the necessary diet and lifestyle changes to recover their health. And we treat lots of patients that have problems of dietary excess, so cardiovascular disease like high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune diseases, lymphoma. These are the conditions that many people come to us with, and also healthy people that want to stay healthy. We've recently published a paper looking at the cardiometabolic changes in healthy people, and it turns out as a percentage of change, healthy people get even more benefit than sick people do when it comes to fasting and diet and lifestyle change. So probably the best application for fasting may turn out to be in healthy people that are trying to stay healthy instead of waiting until they get sick.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Very good. So, since you mentioned scientific and medical research, which I think are just so important, and a lot of people don't know that at True North you actually have a section or an area where you do this research. And I would like to ask you, like, where is it published? And is this research available to physicians?
Yes. So essentially, we are a human subjects laboratory that's disguised as a clinic. The TrueNorth Health Foundation is our 501c3 nonprofit organization that is a research organization that really directs the work that we're doing. We've published 18 papers in peer-reviewed journals, including clinical control trials, case reports, case series. We're just about to begin on our first RCT, so randomized controlled trial that we'll be doing with a local HMO in the treatment of high blood pressure. We published a paper this year that was in conjunction with our colleagues from the Mayo Clinic, looking at not just the effect of fasting on high blood pressure, but the effect of the ability of people to maintain diet and lifestyle changes over a long period of time. So we have 1 year follow-up data showing that 3/4 of those patients were able to maintain their weight loss and drug-free state with normal blood pressure a year later. So not only can people get well when they're at the TrueNorth Health Center, but they can stay well if they're willing to do dangerous and radical things like eat well and exercise and go to bed on time. So, those are the critical variables, is you have to be willing to do the things that cause health if you want to get healthy.
Right, right. Well, I think it's very important to tell people this, what you just said, which is that you all do very serious research and trial and studies. It's not only a place to go to do fasting or to get well, but you are really, publishing, putting papers out there, and I continue to be surprised that a lot of the medical community they don't read those papers or are not aware of that
Well,
research.
the first thing is you have to get is, do people read? I mean, there's only a percentage of the population that read, and those that do they read, that particular type of information? Most physicians are very busy. They don't do a whole lot of reading of journals of any kind, let alone articles that have to do with diet and lifestyle change, because that's not what they're being paid to do. They're being paid for the administration of drugs and surgery for the suppression of the symptoms of disease. That's what medicine is today. And so mostly they're going to focus on how to do what they're being paid for better in terms of drug, surgery, interventive techniques. It's not about talking to the small percentage of the people that are willing to do things like eat well and exercise and go to bed on time, because that represents a very small percentage of the population. Most of your listeners know that most of their friends are not willing to make radical diet and lifestyle changes, and they think that they're crazy for even considering that. And even if they know that it's true, even if they get educated, it's still, because they're addicted to the pleasure trap, that artificial stimulation of dopamine in their brain from the chemicals added to their feed. It's very, very difficult to make changes. Think about this. If you're an alcoholic and you go to an inpatient program for 30 days and spend $40,000 and then go to 90 visits in 90 days and in a 12-step program, and you have family support, there's approximately an 83% chance that you're going to fail in terms of not drinking for a year. If you're a heroin addict, the chances of, even if you go through inpatient program, of not using heroin a year later is less than 10%, 90% failure rate. But if you're going to try to lose weight, like 5% of your body weight, so even a modest amount of weight, the chances of a person losing 5% of their body weight and then maintaining it for a year is 5%, which means 95% failure rate. So you have a better chance under conventional approaches of beating heroin addiction or alcoholism than you do losing weight and keeping it off. And the reason is we lie to people. What do we tell alcoholics? Do we tell alcoholics that they should just have beer and wine, or that they should put their alcohol in a smaller cup and drink with a spoon and then they won't be a drunk anymore? Do we tell heroin addicts they should only use heroin on the weekends? Okay, or only for special occasions, like, Tuesdays or something? So no, what do we tell alcoholics? They have to not drink at all, nothing. They have to completely stop. We tell heroin addicts, do you want to become sober? You have to quit. But what do we tell overweight people? Well, a little bit won't hurt. Chew your food more. Put your fork down between each bite. You can don't have sugar, but you can have oil, or don't have oil, but you can have sugar. Don't have oil and sugar, but you can have salt. So we lie. Instead of telling people the truth, is that if you're struggling with overweight, you need to stop putting the chemicals in your brain that fool your brain satiety mechanisms and are leading to overeating. That means adopting a whole plant food SOS-free diet. But that's considered so radical that it's not even worth discussing, because that would mean you'd have to give up the 93% of calories that most people are consuming, which are derived from animal foods and highly processed pleasure trap chemicals. It would mean eating fruits and vegetables, grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds, not meat, fish, fowl, eggs, dairy products, oil, salt, and sugar. And that's such a radical concept that right now the chance of resolving overweight is less than resolving drug addiction.
What do genetics, what role do they play in losing weight?
There are some people in our society that have a particularly difficult time losing weight. Those people are called women. They're energy-conserving fat storage devices that have high levels of estrogen because they have to survive a period of biological vulnerability called pregnancy. So women are designed to store fat more efficiently, for example, than males. And as a consequence, if you're comparing women and men's weight loss, for example, women do not lose weight as efficiently as men lose weight because they are full of estrogen, which is a fat storage hormone. That's why if you inject men with a bunch of estrogen, they would grow breasts and hips and gain fat. If you inject women with enough testosterone, their fat would melt off them. But then they would get hairy and get cancer and die. So it wouldn't be a good weight loss strategy. But the point is, the differences between males and females are biological, not psychological. And so if a woman has highly efficient system, has good plumbing, if she's a winner, if she comes from the ancestors that survived the boat ride, she's going to get fat easily on modern, highly processed foods. So if you're a female and you want to lose weight, you have to adopt a health promoting diet. How much can you get away with? Well, it depends how efficient your system is. If you're a highly efficient system, you may not be able to get away with much of anything. And so we see people that are overweight and say, oh, they've got something wrong with them. Well, no, they've got something right with them. It's just they're living in the wrong environment. If you take an overweight person, put them in an environment of a whole food system, they lose weight down to their optimum weight and maintain a high degree of health. It's much harder to take people that are having trouble maintaining weight than it is to take people to lose weight. It's just you can't have a highly efficient plumbing system and put them on a highly refined diet and not expect the consequences to be overweight. And when you gain fat, you gain visceral fat, and visceral fat acts like a tumor. It produces inflammatory products that leads to heart disease, cancer, diabetes. And so when people are walking around overweight, they've got to realize in their head, they're also walking around with a several pound of visceral fat, which is like having a several pound tumor. So it's not surprising that this weight intimately correlates with increased risk of all of these chronic degenerative diseases that you see people suffering around you.
Right.
And that's where one of the reasons why fasting can be so effective, because in fasting, you preferentially mobilize visceral fat. Sure, if you go on a 2-week fast, you might lose 20% of your total body fat, but you'll lose 50% or more of your visceral fat. And so the percentage of visceral fat to adipose tissue is more efficiently mobilized in fasting. And that may be one of the reasons why we see such dramatic short-term changes in some of these diseases of dietary excess.
I get this comment or this question all the time when I'm doing a little program or something, and it's the topic of neuroadaptation. And I always send people to your website here, to this article that talks about neuroadaptation, and it is brilliant. And I would like to get to have you comment in your own words about what is neuroadaptation and how long does it take, and how can somebody be adapted and then go back to the old ways.
Well, neuroadaptation takes place in all our senses. Like, for example, if you walk from a bright light into a dark theater, at first you can't see. You're walking around, stepping on people, whatever. But eventually the rods and cones in your eyes neuroadapt to the limited light. They make better use of the limited light, and then you can start to see, who you just sat next to or whatever. Well, that also takes place with taste. And so you have taste sensitivity to salt, to sweet, etc. That can change. We've demonstrated in a study with taste neuroadaptation that in fasting, good foods start to taste better, in part because you become more responsive to the sodium, to the sugar, etc. Well, an example of this is people on high salt diets. People on high salt diets tend to have trouble with obesity because salt stimulates passive overeating. In other words, if you ate your fill of something where you felt full, where you were satiated with, say, rice, you'd eat a certain amount. Everything else being equal, that same rice, when it's salted, you'll eat more before your brain is satiated. People say, well, because it tastes better. But that's what tasting better means, is that those chemicals result in more dopamine stimulation in your brain. Dopamine is the neurochemical associated with pleasure. So you get more pleasure, and the satiety mechanism, the satiation, the turn-off overeating mechanism is blunted. So when people are on high salt diets, they will eat more, whatever it is, than they would if they were eating on low sodium diets. Well, if you go on a low sodium diet, eventually you get to the point where you like the less salty foods, but it takes a month. Some people a little longer, some people a little less. With fasting, it happens more quickly. If you go on a low fat diet, and then you will not feel satiated or satisfied because you've been addicted to this satiation of high-fat diet. It takes almost 3 months for people to neuroadapt to a low-fat diet. If you tell a person, look, go on this diet, everything's going to be disgusting, tasteless, swill. You won't like anything. You'll be hungry all the time. But just do it for 3 months and everything will be fine. Your adherence is going to be very low. But if you take a person on a fast and put them on the same diet, now all of a sudden that transition to enjoying lower fat, lower salt food is a little bit easier. It's quicker. And we've demonstrated that. As I said, if you go onto our website, TrueNorthHealth.com, you can find all of our studies, and you can see that study on taste neuroadaptation and showing why it is that it appears to be easier after fasting. So taste neuroadaptation is really just a question of being addicted to the artificial stimulation of very highly concentrated foods that don't exist in a natural setting. Salt, oil, and sugar are not food. They're hyper-concentrated byproducts of food that are added back in to make things, quote, taste better. That is to stimulate more dopamine production in our brain. And because those chemicals are added to our feed is why we're addicted to these highly processed foods. And it's why we're fat. It's why we have visceral fat. And it's why we get heart disease, cancer, diabetes, autoimmune disease, and the rest of it.
Right, right. And so, but then I find this interesting. You said, some people may take a month, some people may take a little longer or a little less to neuroadapt to, let's say, no salt or whatever, no sugar, no oil. So I'm thinking that it does take some willpower to during that month or whatever to say no. Like when I'm driving by that coffee shop or that bakery, and I have to tell myself no.
If you're an alcoholic and you've recently recovered, you don't say, well, you should go work as a bartender. That would be the best job for you. Let's put you into an environment where you have constant stimulation and constant. Or if you're trying to lose weight, best thing for you to do is go to work where they have big bowls of candy around all the time, and everybody's put social pressure on you to engage in short-term pleasure-seeking, self-indulgent behavior. And let's get you angry, tired, exhausted, and frustrated so that you're in constant psychological pain, so that you're tempted to use food as a drug, have a drug-like effect psychologically. And let's make sure your life really sucks, so that it's harder for you to have the ability to make these decisions long enough in order to be able to get well. That's why we like TrueNorth Health Center, because we literally think of it as a prison camp. We lock people up, remove them from a lot of these stresses, and then they're able to live in a more supportive environment, at least long enough to get to the point where they realize, health really does result from healthful living, and it is possible to get out of constant pain, debility, and frustration. And the reality is most people are not going to do this because they're addicts and because they don't have enough motivation. Most patients I see that are successful are either motivated by pain, debility, and fear of death, or for whatever reason, they're really motivated to have high quality long-term life. In other words, they don't want to spend the last 20 years of their life unable to talk or move, lying in some nursing home bed, waiting for people to come and change their diaper because they've stroked out or had a heart attack. For whatever reason, they've decided they want to hang around autonomous, able to take care of themselves and function until they reach their genetic potential, hopefully go to bed and don't wake up one night because they've had a good life and a good death. And that's not what's happening to people. The last 20 years of their life suck because they've compromised their health and they don't even realize that there's another alternative. And that's where sometimes fasting and dietary change is so powerful, because once people get a sense like, I don't have to have all these symptoms and secondary effects, then sometimes they're motivated to be able to take on these really difficult challenges, which is how do you live in a world designed to make you fat, sick, and miserable and not succumb to it? And it's really difficult. So even knowing it doesn't make it easy. It just makes it possible.
Right, right. Well, that's my question that was following is then comes the challenge after people leave, True North, and they stay there a month or 2 months or whatever, or 2 weeks, then they go, and the challenge becomes, how do I live? Because when I go to work and there are donuts, and if I have a work meeting in a restaurant, and there's food there, yes, and then there's a party. So, I mean,
well, that's why we spend so much time on what we call education, which is actually brainwashing, which is basically trying to give people strategies to deal with the world that's designed to undermine their success. And, one thing we try to encourage people to do is realize that constant stress is not really a good thing. Those constant stress hormones lead to all kinds of problems. And so one thing we try to do right away is to get people to realize that there are some things they can do something about, and a lot of stuff they can't do anything about. And we want to spend as little time as possible on the stuff you have no control over, that you can't influence, that doesn't matter, in terms of, things you can take action on. We're not saying you can't be a fully informed citizen, but you don't need to spend hours a day watching the news and getting involved in all these terrible things that you can't have any influence on, that you have no effect, no positive effect on your life. So focus more on the things you might actually be able to do something about. And then also recognize the fact that there's, different kinds of people in your life. Some people are very supportive, and some people are what we call energy vampires. And they're people that make other people as sick and miserable as they are, so they don't have to feel so bad by comparison. And so then we try to teach patients to say the N word in public. No. And that means, try to regulate the stress in your environment. Like, for example, if you live in a very supportive environment, obviously it's easier to make good decisions. So we try as best we can within our context to create as supportive an environment as possible. And again, these are very, very difficult things to do. But like, what else are you going to do if your goal is to live a long and healthy life? If your goal isn't to live a healthy, happy life, well, then this is a waste of time. Go focus on whatever your, other goals are. But if your goal is to live healthfully, you have to remember, health results from healthful living. It's diet, sleep, and exercise. So a lot of attention has to be put to diet, sleep, and exercise. It's not the only thing. There's other things you're going to have to deal with too. But, that's the big challenge of life. How can you manipulate your environment to a point where you can spend as much time as possible feeling positive and feeling healthy? Health is not the end, but it's an important component. If you're going to experience most of the balance of your life experience as highly positive, which we call happiness, health is a really important component of that. It's very hard to be consistently happy if you're in constant pain, having to deal with debility. So, it's not the only thing, but it's an important thing.
Well, learning how to manipulate your environment, which you said, it comes with knowing yourself. And I've been knowing myself now for 12 years, and I continue to learn things about myself. And I guess it never ends. But I think that's a very good concept. And I don't know if you could expand a little more about how can someone learn to manipulate their environment.
So it's going to be a bit of experimenting, because you won't know necessarily intellectually how much price you're paying for various prices that you're expending. For example, you may think that the important thing is to have a bigger house. And you think that the price of commuting 2 hours a day to a job you hate, to work with people you despise, for a company you detest, to make things you don't need, is going to be worth it, because in order to be happy, you need more short-term pleasure-seeking, self-indulgent behavior. So you need to make more money. But you may find out that, actually you'd rather make less money, have a smaller house, but not have to drive in some commute. Okay, other people, they like driving. It's not a problem. They enjoy it, no problem. But you have to get clear about the price you're paying, both financial price and also, cost of health and happiness price you're paying for your behaviors. And so it looks critically analyzing the different aspects in your life. And there's lots of decisions to make. And sometimes people are good at making decisions because they are in touch with their own short and long-term benefit interests, and other people are not as good. Some of those people need help. Like, for example, they might see a psychologist like Dr. Lyle. Dr. Lyle explained to me what behavioral cognitive therapy is really about. At first, I was like, oh, psychology.
Yeah.
But then he explained to me, he said, basically, psychologists, if they do their job right, they're helping people do experiments to determine how they can manipulate their life so that they can be happier. And one of those experiments is also, how can you manipulate other people's behavior so they're less annoying? So, and when he explained that to me, I thought, well, now that makes a lot of sense. How can I learn to manipulate other people so they don't bother me as much? And that felt a little bit more real. He also explained to me that sometimes you can't change other people to the degree, that you'd like, but you can change how you feel about their behavior. For example, he said, if you're in an elevator and somebody behind you starts poking you in the back with a sharp stick, you could get angry. And you feel that emotion because you don't like being poked in the back with a starchy, and you turn around and you see that the person is a blind person and they weren't trying to hurt you. They were just trying to figure out where they were in the elevator, and they accidentally stuck you in the back with their white cane. Well, you still step out of the way because you don't want to get poked with a white cane, but you don't feel angry at the person because you realize they're doing the best they can. This wasn't about you. This was about them. And so now, even though you still may have to change your behavior, i.e. move your body, whatever it is, your anger and the emotional price you're paying for that may change. If you can understand what people are doing around you, you may be able to change how you feel about them. It doesn't mean you still don't have to work on modifying behavior or modifying your behavior, but it can change the dynamic quite a bit. And I think that's really true when we're dealing with relatives and other people. If you really understand that oftentimes the things people are doing that annoy you the most, they may not really have full control over, which means that your expectations for them to change their behavior may not be realistic, which means you may need to change your environment, or you may need to manipulate the circumstances so that they are less annoying to you. And I think for a lot of people, a lot of stress they experience are things that they may be able to manage better. If they can't do it on their own, then they ought to consult with somebody like Dr. Lyle, who can help them, efficiently figure out how to do the experiments and figure out what actually works for them. The same thing's true with diet. If you go on the internet, oh my God, everybody now go on the dead Dr. Atkins diet. May his fillet of soul rest in peace. You can eat greasy, fatty, slimy, big pork rinds, and you'll lose some weight. And that it may even be true that what's good for short-term gain may not be necessarily good for long-term health. And so sometimes it's worth consulting with people that actually have some experience working with people and figuring out what actually works when it comes to diet and lifestyle change. And theoretically, that's what education is about, is finding people that have already moved up that learning curve and are willing to help you do it, so you don't have to do everything by trial and error. That's what we do with fasting. We've fasted 25,000 people over the last 40 years. So we've got a lot of experience on how to not feed people without screwing them up. So, if you're interested in doing a fast, it's not unreasonable to read a book like our new book, Can Fasting Save Your Life, or talk to somebody that actually knows something, rather than have to figure everything out the hard way, which is what we've done kind of over the years.
Well, I think that's crucial, because when you're a TrueNorth, besides having all the doctors take care of you and the food or the fasting, it's the education that you give every day, lectures, and then you have all of these DVDs, and that's empowering. And what I loved a lot what you said is experimenting. We're all individuals, and I see it more and more that sometimes we just have to experiment and run an experiment on ourselves. So what would you say to, I get people that honestly are like upset with themselves and even angry, because they say, I know what to do, and I know why I'm doing it, and I know how to do it. And then I don't, and then I do it for 7 days or 10 days, and then I don't do it anymore.
Yeah. Well, I would say you're way ahead of most people. If you understand what to do, you have motivation to do it. Now you're trying to implement it. This is a very difficult thing to do, and it takes sometimes repeat experience. In other words, you do it right, you succeed; you do it wrong, you fail; you do it right, and eventually you get tired of paying the price. And a certain percentage of people can be successful. So the hardest part is understanding. Okay, what is it? What's my goal? Number one. Number two, what would I have to do to achieve my goal? Then you have to do it long enough to be successful, and then you have to sustain it. Those are 4 separate areas, all require a different learning curve. And very few people go, like, for example, if you go up to your alcoholic friend and you say, you know how your life sucks? It's because of the alcohol. They don't go, oh, it's the alcohol. I had no idea. Thank you so much. I just won't drink anymore. Because they just go, mind your own effing business. So the first person is, what is it I'm trying to do? Number 2, okay, what's a strategy that makes sense to me? What do I have high self-efficacy? If I did it, it would work. Okay, how can I implement it long enough to find success? How can I sustain it? The hardest part for a lot of the people that have done the first 3 steps is the 4th step. The hardest part for people that haven't done the first step is the first step. So every step that you're at is the hard part. What I can tell you this, though, is I have patients now, we're getting 30-year, 35-year, and in some cases 40-year follow-ups. And the people that have done it, once they get into doing it, it's much, much easier to sustain it because you have that learning curve behind you. You have that success behind you. The most common comment that many of those people are making is, everybody I know is dead. So though I got patients now outliving their kids. I mean, it's really tragic in some cases because, you know, the kids don't adopt the principles, they can't influence, and they're dropping out. My mother, when she was 92, she said she'd outlived all of her friends, all 50 of her lifelong friends. And she said it get harder and harder to make new friends because even friends 10 years younger than her were too old and too sick and too developed to do the things that she wanted to do. And so she said, Alan, you have to warn your patients, if they're going to do this diet, make younger friends.
Yeah.
Well, so make younger friends,
yeah,
or make a few have a few healthy friends so that there'll be somebody left as you get older. Because, you know, there's a certain satisfaction in knowing you were right and everybody else was wrong, but you still want to have people around there to gloat with.
Yeah. Well, I think that sometimes people, including myself at the beginning, we have unrealistic expectations on ourselves. We think that the first time that I try this, I do this, I'm going to be perfect. And then I realized, well, no, that it's like you said. The
important thing is to pay attention. So when you do the right things and you get benefit, pay attention. And if you decide to indulge in your addiction, just watch and see what happens. If what we're saying is true to you, the risk-reward ratio should become fairly apparent. The problem is there's a delay. You know, you can sometimes engage in these behaviors without paying the price immediately. It's easier. Like, for example, autoimmune patients have a much easier time with adherence because they have one meal out of line and they get pain. Whereas a person with high blood pressure, they might eat crap for weeks before their blood pressure goes back up. And then even then they don't feel it. You know, they're taking a number. It says constant pain and debility. That's great. Fulminating skin rashes and all kinds of inflammatory joints. Those patients are easier to get adherence with until they get well. Because then, just like a recovered alcoholic, they start thinking, well, I'm better now. I could control it. I could just have a little bit. A little bit won't hurt. And then before long, like the alcoholic, they're waking up under the Golden Gate Bridge naked, wondering how they got there because they're back into the pleasure trap. If you haven't read The Pleasure Trap, you should read The Pleasure Trap because The Pleasure Trap explains the hidden force that undermines health and happiness. It details this whole argument. It's not what you want to hear, but it's what you need to know to get and stay healthy. So reading that book is actually good. Dr. Lyle did a brilliant job of explaining both the psychology as well as, you know, some of the social implications that go along with making these changes. This is the most difficult thing most people will ever do in their life. But it's not, they don't do it and then say, oh, it wasn't worth the trouble. I did all that work and I got healthy, but I'd rather be fat and sick like everybody else, you know.
Right. Well,
but it will entail some social consequences. You will become, in some circles, a social outcast. And so you have to be prepared to, you know, try to manipulate your friends and not annoying you too much, but also cultivating new relationships with people that'll be somewhat more supportive. They don't all have to be health conscious. People don't all need to eat healthy to be your friend. They just need to not be abusive because you're trying to do it. That's all. It's just like an alcoholic doesn't need every one of their friends to be a non-drinker. They just can't be cruel and interfere with their ability to be successful. So you're not asking your friends to all be healthy and eat well, but you are asking them to tolerate your behavior. And, you know, you can be as non-annoying as possible. You don't want to walk in the room and go, oh my God, you're not going to eat that, are you? I can hear your blood vessels thickening from over here. Don't be that person, you know, just focus on your behavior and keep your mouth shut. You don't need the stress.
Yes. Well, and that's when personality types come in place because some people are more, you know, they're pleasers and they can't, you know, and the others don't. You know, it depends. So
Dr. Lyle talks about that in the book, about the people that have the hardest time are those loving, caring people that are loving, caring people, and they always want to help people, and they feel bad that they're suffering, so they're always trying to be helpful and kind. Those people have a hard time because they get all kinds of social feedback. people that really don't care that much what other people think, this is much easier.
That's much
Some
easier.
people, they lose weight, they feel bad that the other people feel bad and they're uncomfortable.
That's
and so
right.
if you're one of those kind, loving, caring people, it doesn't mean you can't be healthy and happy, but you're going to have to work a lot harder at it. It's going to be much more difficult for you. If you happen to be one of those people that's not that socially concerned, it's much easier. Like myself, if you're on the spectrum, hey, it's no problem because you don't really care what other people think. So it's really not a problem. But if you are a normal person, yes, I agree. It's going to be much more difficult.
Yeah. It used to be, I am the kind of person that like you mentioned, that suffers. Although it took me 12 years and I've been able to learn to let things, just go.
Well, I think that's why you bring a very valuable perspective, though, because you're like a normal person. You're one of those kind, caring people. And no, I'm serious, but you feel for other people and all that stuff.
I do.
So you have a much more difficult time, doing this. It's going to be a much bigger challenge. So how you figure out to do that, that's not something I can bring to the table because, that was never an issue for me. But for you, bringing that to the table is important because most people are like you in terms of their normal people and caring and all that stuff. And I'm not being critical of you because I know you can't help it because Dr. Lyle explained to me that's personality.
That's right. That's right.
One thing you want to remember is that other people believe that there's nothing you could do with your time or your energy that's more important than meeting their needs. Whether it's a child, a teenager, your boss, or your friends, they cannot imagine what could be more valuable in your life than you doing the things that meet their needs. So they will try to use every manipulation to get you to meet their needs. That's essentially what their life is about, is trying to get other people to meet their needs. And when you realize that, then you'll realize that some people, no matter how much you meet their needs, it's never going to be enough. And so if your psychology is such, you're always trying to satisfy other people's insatiable demand for your time, then there's a problem because your limiting time in life is time. No matter how rich you are, you only get 168 hours a week. You can't buy any more time. And so how you use your time becomes your most precious commodity. And if you spend all your time meeting everybody else's needs, you don't have the time necessary in order to be healthy and happy. Because you've got to have time to sleep. You've got to have time to eat well and exercise. And if you spend all of your time helping other people, there's a deficit and you're gonna fail.
The Pleasure Trap is one of the books that everybody needs to read. I featured it in my online book club, and it's in my YouTube channel. And you've got to, if you want to have a group. But Dr. Goldhamer, besides The Pleasure Trap, what other book? You mentioned the other book.
Well, we have a new book coming out in June that is really good, and it's called Can Fasting Save Your Life? And it's everything about fasting, everything you and your doctor would need to know in terms of getting people through fasting, what it helps, what it doesn't, the values, the labs. We put all the information, including the 18 papers we've published in the peer-reviewed journal, summarized and integrated into this book. We're really excited about it. It's available now on Amazon through preprints. It'll be coming out at the end of June. I think it'll be a really helpful resource for people. And certainly, if you haven't read The Pleasure Trap, you should. If you don't like reading, then listen to it, because Chef AJ did a brilliant professional job of an audio recording of it. You can listen to it. I know I process information better orally than I do writing, and so I find that's a very useful tool. But those two books really deal with the issues of why it is people are having trouble and strategies for undoing that trouble. And I think they represent a lot of work. I think they can save people a lot of time and trouble.
Right. I know you've talked about this so briefly, but would you give your opinion on Prolon and the mimicking of the fasting?
So Prolon is a substance Walter Longo came up with. It's basically macadamia nuts and a vitamin supplement. You take it exclusively for 5 days a month. And if you're not eating crap 5 days a month, that's 15% of the time. That appears to be enough to actually start inducing changes. They don't advocate dietary change the rest of the time. You just do this as a weight loss strategy 5 days a month. Anything you do besides eating standard American diet is probably a good thing. And so I got no problem with any of these protocols. they're trying to mimic the fasting effect, which is there's a hunger blunting effect when you have no carbohydrate in your diet. And so again, any strategy that helps people not eat meat, fish, fowl, eggs, dairy products, oil, salt, and sugar for whether it's 5 days a month or every day of the month, I think is a good thing. My preference and the advantages of the Prolon, these are things people can do at home. They don't require them to modify medications. They're safe. They're maybe perfectly reasonable mimicking type effects. It's not the same thing as fasting. And I recommend everybody fast every day for 12 to 16 hours. That is, don't eat 3 to 4 hours before you go to sleep at night. And then occasionally do a longer fast. If you're going to do a longer fast, though, whether you do it at the TrueNorth Health Center or you do it at home with some remote support, you still have to do the same protocol, which is make sure you're a good candidate for fasting. That's history, exam, and lab. And make sure that when you fast, you rest and that you appropriately feed afterwards so you avoid the complications that can come from fasting. And again, if you read our book, Can Fasting Save Your Life, you'll understand everything you need to know about fasting. We've got it really well laid out there. And it may be a facilitating tool, but whether you fast or not, the big issue is diet, sleep, and exercise. Whole plant food, SOS-free diet, appropriate exercise, and enough sleep. If you take care of diet, sleep, and exercise, you will lose weight. You will start recovering your health. And, it can take longer or shorter depending on the person, what their challenges are. The benefit of fasting is it can be a way of speeding that process up. And also, some people are on a lot of medications. They need a little bit of help. But for the average person that's relatively healthy, diet, sleep, exercise is going to drive them to a higher level of health.
I like it. I like how you mentioned sleep, and we seldom talk about sleep, but in a little nutshell, how does sleep
So
affect?
it's one of our most important activities. It's when the anabolic cascade of hormones kicks in during non-REM sleep. That's where your energy comes from. If you have sleep deprivation, you will have immune suppression and you'll have fatigue. If you have fatigue, you won't be willing to exercise. You won't be willing to put the time into eating properly. Your metabolic rate's going to slow down. If you want to lose weight, there's 2 important things to do. Number 1, get more sleep. Number 2, eat more. But eat more low-density, high-nutrition foods like fruits, salads, and steamed vegetables, and less of the highly processed, heated, beaten, treated junk crap that's making you fat and sick. Get rid of the salt, oil, and sugar. Get rid of the animal foods. Get rid of the alcohol. Basically, I tell people this. If you want to know what you should eat or not eat, get very quiet, close your eyes, and just ask yourself, do I really, really, really want whatever the substance is? And if the answer is truly yes, you can't have it. Because you get nothing.
Nothing.
If you really, really, really want it, it's probably banging on the pleasure trap. It's probably a drug-like effect. Like, for example, if somebody said to you, you can't have carrots, you'd be like, I like carrots, but okay.
Whatever. Yeah.
You wouldn't get all upset about it. Somebody says you can't have chocolate, it's like,
Yeah, exactly.
because carrots have 150 calories a pound and chocolate has 2,500 calories a pound. As far as your brain's concerned, chocolate is something worth fighting for.
That's right. And don't you have a system for something that you like that that you have to put in the freezer?
Yeah, nuts are an example of a highly nutritious food, but they're very concentrated. And some people have some troubles, particularly with some nuts. I personally have a little bit of a problem with cashews because I really like cashews. And I thought early on, well, I know I shouldn't have more than an ounce of nuts a day because I'm trying to keep percentage of calories of fat to 15 to 18% of calories in the diet and don't want to get fat, etc. So I said, I guess I have to give up cashews, but I thought I don't want to give up cashews. I like cashews. So I thought, well, I'll try an experiment. So I keep nuts in the freezer because it keeps them from going bad. I take the nuts out. I would take the cashews out. I would measure out the ounce of cashews and I'd put the nuts back in the freezer. And the rule was, if I ever went back for seconds, that was the end of the cashews. So that was 38 years ago. We still have cashews in the freezer. So I've wanted to go back, but whenever I wanted to go back, I thought, well, if I go back, then I don't get to have cashews, and I like cashews. So now we still have cashews, but that's been for me enough of a discipline in order to be able to avoid it. Now, it's interesting. Walnuts, almonds, by the time you shell 6 walnuts, I'm ready to move on with my day. That's enough. And we don't keep nut butters or things that make it easier to overeat. So we try to get fresh, whole, raw, in the shell,
Right. Yeah.
And that provides a little bit of disincentive for overeating. For most things, though, like fruits, vegetables, steamed and starchy vegetables, we can eat with the band, eat to satiety. Without the salt, oil, and sugar, it's very difficult to sustain obesity. So for most of us, we don't have to worry about weighing and measuring and portion controlling those other foods. It's just the super concentrated foods, the avocados and nuts we have to go over.
And you, because you can control it, but I mean, this what you're doing with the cashews, maybe it wouldn't work for somebody else.
No, some people are going to have it out of the house because they're not yet able to regulate. And you have to know yourself, and you have to be honest with yourself. And so for some people, it's going to be easier just not to have the temptation there at all. For other people, they're able to regulate it. And so, you know, and so you may not be able to do it today, but, you know, maybe a year from now, you'll get to where you'll be able to handle that. And when we're talking about whole natural foods, it's more possible to control it than we are when we're talking with pleasure trap chemicals. You know, it's not like alcohol. There's a different gradient of adherence and control. Right. Also, as you neuroadapt, you get to the point where you don't really crave the concentrated chemicals anymore. And so if you go back and eat like soup in a restaurant, you'll think, oh my God, it's so salty. It's not even palatable. Whereas before it used to taste really good. You know, I've had patients tell me they thought, oh, they made a mistake and they poured too much salt in there, and they'll have the waiter taste it. And it's like, no, it tastes good. And they realize it's their palate changed. And again, we have a study showing that in fact does happen over time.
It does happen. It happened to me. I used to be able to have a little bit of fruit jam every now and then. And now I can't, because I put it in my mouth and all I can taste is sugar.
I had a guy who came in. He was a crusty blue collar worker. He did the program, got well, did great. And he said he complied. He did what he said he was going to do. He was a military guy. He said he'd give me a year and he would do it. And he did. He complied for a year. And then he said he went back to his old Chicago pizza, his favorite pizza place. And he said it was just one piece, because that was the one thing that he really missed. And he got a piece and he couldn't eat it because he said they must have changed the recipe because it was so greasy and salty. He couldn't even stand it. And he came back and he told me I ruined him.
You did. You ruined it. I totally agree with that. But
so the point is now it doesn't require discipline for him, and he doesn't feel at a loss because it no longer has got control of him.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, we've taken enough time from you. There are several questions, but we'll just some other time.
Well, we can do another one. If your viewers have questions that they would like asked, we have a free service. They can go onto our website, fill out the registration forms. I'll review their medical history. I'm happy to have a phone conversation with them, trying to answer their questions, point them in the right direction. And you know, they're welcome to do that. Just go to TrueNorthHealth.com and complete the registration forms, and it's a no-cost service. Also, we live stream our lectures from True North Health. You can go onto our website and participate in the educational programs that we offer to our patients as well. There's no cost for that as well.
Right, you live stream. Well, I will put all of this info in the email that will go with the replay to everybody. I'll remind them of this.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
As I said, I think you all be pleased when you read the new book, Confess and Save Your Life. It is really, really good.
Oh, that is amazing. Well, looking forward to it. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much again. And thanks everybody. And I'll put this video up in my YouTube channel if you want to watch it. Okay. Goodbye, everyone.